A Roman warship could weigh more than a modern blue whale, yet it was powered not by engines, but by human muscle. Men who could haul, row, climb, and fight for hours without rest. Most of them never touched a gym, yet their bodies rivaled elite athletes today. That fact alone should make us pause. When we imagine ancient Rome, we picture marble statues, armored legions, gladiators drenched in sand and blood. But Rome's true strength did not only march on roads, it floated. It creaked and groaned on timber decks, cut through salt spray, and survived storms that would terrify modern sailors. The Roman Empire was held together by ships, and those ships were powered by bodies shaped not by vanity, but by necessity. This is the hidden story of how ancient Roman sailors, ordinary men from ports, farms, and poor neighborhoods, became some of the most brutally conditioned power athletes in human history. Not through machines, not through supplements, but through relentless, functional movement embedded into daily survival. And buried inside their world is a truth that quietly challenges everything we think we know about strength, fitness, and what the human body is really built to do. The mystery begins with a simple question. How did men with no modern nutrition science, no gyms, no protein shakes, no rest days, develop the kind of strength and endurance required to move floating fortresses across the Mediterranean? The answer is not a secret technique or a lost exercise manual. It's something far more uncomfortable and far more relevant to us today. To understand it, we have to step onto the deck. Imagine the smell first. Tar, salt, wet wood, sweat baked by the sun. The deck is never still. Even in calm water, it shifts beneath your feet, forcing your muscles to make thousands of tiny adjustments just to keep you upright. There are no chairs, no railings designed for comfort. Every rope is heavy. Every surface is unforgiving. Your day begins before dawn and ends when your hands can barely close. Roman sailors were not specialists in one movement. They were total body machines. Rowing alone was an act of violence against the body. A war galley could carry over 170 rowers, each man driving a massive oar that weighed as much as a grown child. This was not gentle endurance rowing. It was explosive, synchronized power. Thousands of near maximal contractions per hour, performed in cramped positions that demanded hip mobility, spinal strength, and iron grip endurance. Modern biomechanics tells us that rowing engages over 80% of the body's musculature. Legs drive, hips snap, core stabilizes, shoulders transmit force, hands clamp and release. Roman sailors did this not for fitness, but for survival. Miss the rhythm and the oar could slam back into your ribs. Fall out of sync and you endangered the entire ship. Over time, this kind of work reshaped the body. Bones thickened under repeated stress. Tendons stiffened and strengthened. The nervous system learned efficiency, how to produce force without wasted motion. These men developed what we would now call work capacity, the ability to generate power again and again without collapse. But rowing was only the beginning. A Roman sailor climbed constantly. Rigging had to be adjusted, sails repaired, lines secured in heavy wind. This meant hauling your body vertically using nothing but rope and calloused hands. There were no safety harnesses. A slip could mean death. So grip strength became life itself. Today's studies show that grip strength is one of the strongest predictors of longevity and overall health. In Rome, it was non-negotiable. Your hands were never fresh. They were swollen, cracked, and numb. Yet you climbed anyway, developing forearms like braided rope and shoulders built for endless tension. And here's the part we often miss. These movements were never isolated. There was no arm day or leg day. Every task blended pushing, pulling, twisting, carrying, and stabilizing into a single integrated demand. The body adapted as a whole. This is the first lesson hidden in the life of Roman sailors. Strength is not built in pieces. It's built in systems. Modern fitness culture loves separation. Machines isolate muscles. Programs divide the body into compartments. But the human body evolved to work as one unit, responding to complex, unpredictable challenges. Roman sailors didn't train muscles. They trained survival, and survival made them powerful. Their diet surprisingly supported this brutal output. While they didn't eat lavishly, they ate consistently. Grain, legumes, olive oil, dried fish, occasional meat. Simple food, high in calories, eaten to fuel work rather than pleasure. There was no concept of bulking or cutting. The body found its own balance. What's striking is that skeletal remains of Roman sailors and laborers show dense bones and muscular attachment points far more pronounced than those of modern sedentary populations. Their bodies physically remodeled themselves to meet the demands placed upon them. The environment sculpted the athlete, which leads us to a second revelation. The body does not need motivation, it needs necessity. Roman sailors didn't need discipline hacks or inspirational quotes. The sea did not negotiate. The rope did not care how you felt. If you didn't pull, you drowned. If you didn't climb, the sail tore. Movement was not optional. It was woven into existence. Today, we often try to force movement into lives designed to eliminate it. We sit, then schedule exercise as a correction. Roman sailors lived inside movement. Their fitness was a byproduct of life, not an activity separate from it. And that difference changes everything. As ships grew larger and Rome's naval power expanded, sailors became something closer to hybrid athletes. They weren't just rowers. They were fighters. Boarding actions required sudden bursts of violence, sprinting across unstable decks, leaping gaps, wrestling armed enemies while waves crashed around them. This demanded a rare combination of endurance and explosiveness. Modern science calls this concurrent capacity, the ability to sustain long-duration effort and still produce maximal force on demand. It's notoriously difficult to train artificially, but Roman sailors lived inside it. Their nervous systems were constantly switching gears. Slow, rhythmic rowing could turn instantly into chaotic combat. The body learned adaptability. Today, elite military units and high-level athletes chase the same quality through complex training protocols. Roman sailors acquired it by living. There's something deeply humbling about that. We often assume ancient people were weaker because they lacked technology. In truth, technology removed the need for their strength. The more machines did, the less the body had to. The third lesson from Roman sailors is this: resilience is built through exposure, not avoidance. Storms were not rare events. They were inevitable. Cold, heat, hunger, fear. These were not stressors to be minimized. They were conditions to be endured. Over time, the sailors' bodies and minds adapted. Modern research into hormesis, the idea that small doses of stress make biological systems stronger, confirms what these men lived daily. Controlled hardship builds capacity. Comfort erodes it. But this is not a romantic call to suffering. Roman sailors didn't suffer for the sake of suffering. They suffered because they had to, and the body responded by becoming more capable. There is a difference between destructive stress and meaningful stress. The sailors' labor had purpose. Every pull mattered. Every action contributed to survival or victory. That meaning transformed hardship into adaptation rather than burnout. And meaning, as modern psychology shows, is one of the strongest buffers against exhaustion. As years passed, seasoned sailors moved differently from new recruits. Their movements were economical, almost calm. They wasted nothing. This efficiency is another hallmark of true athleticism. Not how hard you can go once, but how well you can repeat effort without breaking. In today's terms, they had mastered energy management, which brings us to the fourth lesson. Real strength is quiet. The strongest sailor was not the loudest or most aggressive. He was the one who could work all day and still respond when chaos erupted. He conserved energy, breathed steadily, trusted his body. This kind of strength doesn't photograph well. It doesn't flex in mirrors, but it wins wars. As Rome expanded, sailors became the connective tissue of the empire. Grain shipments from Egypt. Troops moved across seas. Trade routes secured. Their bodies were infrastructure, and yet most of their names are lost. This anonymity reveals something profound. These men did not train for recognition. They trained because life demanded it. And in that demand, they reached physical potential we now struggle to reclaim. The fifth lesson is perhaps the most uncomfortable for us. Convenience is the enemy of capacity. Every technological improvement reduces physical demand. That's its purpose. But over time, Reduced demand reshapes the body in subtle ways. Lower bone density, weaker connective tissue, reduced coordination. We become fragile not because we are lazy, but because our environment no longer asks anything of us. Roman sailors lived in an environment that constantly asked. They carried water, repaired hulls, loaded cargo, slept on hard surfaces, balanced on moving decks. Their joints learned resilience through use. Their spines learned strength through load. Their feet learned adaptability by never touching flat, cushioned ground. Today, researchers studying foot health note that populations who grow up barefoot or on uneven terrain develop stronger arches and fewer chronic issues. Roman sailors unknowingly trained this way their entire lives. And yet they were not invincible. Injuries happened. Death was common. This wasn't a perfect system, but it reveals a truth we've buried. The body thrives on being needed. The sixth lesson lies in how Roman sailors age. Those who survived into later years often retained remarkable physical ability compared to modern standards. Not because they avoided wear, but because their bodies adapted gradually over decades. Load increased naturally. Skills accumulated. Strength was layered, not rushed. Modern fitness often pushes intensity without foundation. Roman sailors built foundation through years of submaximal work. This created durability. Longevity, it turns out, is not about avoiding effort. It's about pacing it across a lifetime. And finally, the deepest lesson of all. Roman sailors did not see their bodies as projects. They saw them as tools, extensions of will, instruments of survival and service. Their identity was not separate from their physical capability. Today, we often live divided. Mind here, body somewhere else. We outsource movement, then try to reclaim it artificially. The sailors remind us that integration is the goal. To live well is to move often, with purpose, under load, in varied ways, connected to something that matters. You don't need a warship or a galley to learn from them. You need friction. You need weight. You need movement woven into life, not scheduled as an apology for stillness. Carry more. Climb sometimes. Walk farther than necessary. Let your hands work. Let your breath deepen. Let your body solve real problems again. The Roman sailors became power athletes not because they chased strength, but because strength was required of them. And maybe that's the truth we've forgotten. The human body is not meant to be preserved in comfort. It is meant to be used, challenged, trusted. Not to live longer in years alone, but to live deeper inside those years. Strength, real strength, is not about looking powerful. It's about being capable when life demands it. The sea demanded everything from Roman sailors. What is your life asking of you? They say the average Roman watched a gladiator fight the way we watch a championship final today. Eyes wide, breath held, heart racing. But here's the surprising truth. Most gladiators train more hours a day than modern professional athletes, without a single piece of modern gym equipment. No metal machines, no dumbbells, no treadmills. Just wood, sand, stone, sweat, and a level of discipline so fierce it turned ordinary men into legends. And the deeper you look, the more you realize. Their strength wasn't the result of chaos. It was the result of structure. Smart, intentional, almost scientific design. We picture gladiators as shredded icons with sculpted abs, but the real men were different. They carried more body fat than Hollywood imagines, and they did this on purpose, because fat protected organs from deep cuts. It made wounds less deadly. It gave them energy through long hours of training. The more we uncover, the more we see that the gladiator body was built not for aesthetics, but for survival. To understand how they trained without gyms, to understand how they forged a level of durability that modern fighters still study today, we need to walk through the gates of a gladiator school, a ludus, and witness a full day in their life. From the soft light of dawn to the fire of late-day sparring, this is how the world's toughest warriors trained their bodies, sharpened their minds, and prepared their spirits. And it all starts in the silence before sunrise, when the only sound is the soft scrape of sandals against sand. Dawn ritual, awakening the body. The day began before the first Roman citizen even stepped into the streets. While the city still slept, gladiators gathered in the training yard. half awake, breathing slow clouds into the cold morning. They had one rule: the body moves before the mind wakes. Their first task was simple but vital: running, slow and steady. Laps around the yard, not sprinting, not pushing, just moving, letting the heart warm like iron in a forge, letting the muscles loosen one fiber at a time. Modern sports science calls this low-intensity aerobic activation. To the Romans, it was simply preparing for life. After the run came a sequence of mobility drills that would feel familiar in today's physiotherapy rooms. Shoulder circles, hip rotations, deep squats held until the thighs trembled, spinal twists that unlock stiff joints from the previous day's beatings. Quick soldiers stiffen and break. Gladiators learned to flow. Then came breath work. Slow, controlled breathing through the nose, long exhales through the mouth. Breath was power, breath was calm. Breath separated panic from readiness. Even the fiercest fighters knew, the man who controls his breath controls the battle. With the body awakened and the mind anchored, they stepped into the next phase: strength without metal. Punartoni, the Rudies, the wooden sword that built warriors. In the center of the yard stood a long rack of wooden swords. They were heavier than the real thing, sometimes twice the weight, sometimes 3 times. A real steel sword might weigh 1 kilogram. A wooden practice sword, the Rudies, could hit 3. This was deliberate, weighted training, resistance work, the ancient equivalent of lifting heavy to move fast. Gladiators lined up, picked up their practice swords and began the first drill. Slow, controlled swings, downward cuts, upward cuts, horizontal slashes, thrusts that shook the shoulders. These movements built power through repetition. The arms, back, core, and legs all moved as one unified machine. Ancient writers compared gladiators to living hammers, and it makes sense. Each movement was a full-body strike. It wasn't lifting. It wasn't bodybuilding. It was applied strength, functional power, the kind that coils from the lungs, flows through the hips, and explodes through the blade. They practiced thousands of swings a day. Thousands. Technique came first. Strength grew naturally out of precision. Today's best fighters still use this principle. But the sword was just one tool. The next one was even more important. 3. The pila and the post. Strength born from repetition. Scattered through the yard were thick wooden posts planted deep in the ground. These were called pila, but they weren't spears. They were targets. Gladiators stood before them and swung repeatedly, striking them again and again to perfect timing, distance, and angle. This was where the real conditioning began. When you swing a sword into a target thousands of times, the human body transforms. Grip strength skyrockets. Forearms become rope-tight. Shoulders thicken. The back widens. But most importantly, the nervous system adapts. The body learns to deliver power without hesitation. They didn't count sets. They didn't track reps. They kept going until the lanista shouted a command, or until the sun shifted in the sky. Training wasn't a workout. It was a lifestyle. Then came thrust drills. Gladiators thrust forward into the post with so much force that sand burst at their feet. The strike wasn't just physical, it was psychological. The thrust represented clarity, precision, commitment. Hesitation was death. A gladiator trained to remove doubt from movement. This was how technique became instinct, and instinct became survival. 4. The shield, the ancient kettlebell. If the sword built speed, the shield built endurance. Roman shields could weigh up to 10 kilograms, sometimes more. Not only did gladiators train with them, they trained against them. Holding the shield in front of the body for long periods built isometric strength. Pushing the shield forward built explosive power. Rotating the body behind it built core stability. The shield was awkward by design. It didn't balance well. It pulled at your shoulder. It fought you. And that's why it created such powerful bodies. It forced the spine to stabilize. It forced the core to resist rotation. It forced the legs to hold steady. They marched with the shield. They lunged with it. They performed footwork patterns, stepping side to side, back and forward, learning to move as a single armored creature rather than separate limbs. Modern trainers call this anti-rotation training. The gladiators simply called it survival. Every hour spent holding a shield was an hour reshaping the body. And once they could hold the shield without shaking, the lanista added the next challenge: sparring. Footwork. The hidden art of staying alive. Footwork is the forgotten language of ancient combat, and yet it was the foundation of gladiator training. In the sand were carved long lines, straight lines, arcs, diagonals, boxes. These shapes created the geometry of movement. Gladiators moved across these lines again and again, stepping from shape to shape, learning to shift weight, maintain balance, and strike from stable positions. What dancers practice for beauty and fighters practice for speed, gladiators practiced for survival. They learned the 4 pillars of footwork: balance, timing, distance, rhythm. Without these, strength meant nothing. The strongest man in the arena could die if his foot slipped an inch. So they trained until movement became instinct. They shuffled, pivoted, lunged, retreated, sidestepped. They bent low, glided forward, and sprang backward. Many modern MMA techniques, cutting angles, stance switching, explosive entries, have ancestors in these ancient patterns. This is where the fight began, not with weapons, but with feet. 6. The bodyweight furnace, calisthenics of survival. By midday, the heat thickened, and the calisthenics began. Gladiator calisthenics were not decorative exercises. They were necessary movements sculpted by the needs of battle. Their bodies had to be able to squat, twist, fall, sprint, roll, and rise without hesitation. Push-ups, but wide-armed to strengthen the chest for shield bracing. Squats, but deep and held for long stretches to fortify battle stance. Explosive jumps to simulate retreat and attack. Crawling drills strengthening the entire chain of muscles. Carrying heavy stones, reinforcing the lower back for sudden impacts. Isometric holds, teaching the body to resist fatigue. They also practice falling safely, rolling, tumbling, getting up fast. Gladiators who fell slowly died quickly. Every movement had a purpose. Every repetition spoke with meaning. This wasn't fitness, it was transformation. They didn't train to look powerful. They trained to become unbreakable. 7. Sparring, the arena. Before the arena, as the sun began to lower, sparring began, the closest simulation to real combat. But sparring was not reckless. It was heavily controlled, carefully structured, almost academic. Wooden swords replaced steel. Blunt shields replaced deadly edges. They used padding, not for comfort, but to allow speed without fatality. Sparring was where skill became truth. Gladiators sparred in pairs, in trios, in rotating groups. They switched opponents often so they would never become predictable. Every style had its counters. Every fighter had weaknesses. Sparring exposed them like cracks in armor. They practiced offensive bursts, defensive walls, counterattacks, feints endurance rounds, slow motion technique, rounds, full speed exchanges. Sweat dripped, sand kicked, bodies slammed, voices echoed. But beneath the brutality was something beautiful: camaraderie. These men trained together, lived together, bled together. And although the arena demanded they fight separately, the school made them brothers. The lanista watched closely. He corrected mistakes. He demanded perfection. But he also understood when a fighter was exhausted. He knew when to push and when to let the body adapt. Training wasn't about breaking men. It was about remaking them. 8. The diet of strength. The gladiators' table. A surprising fact that shocks most people. Gladiators ate more like modern endurance athletes than bodybuilders. Their diet was rich in carbohydrates, barley, oats, porridge, earning them the nickname hordearii, the barley men. They ate beans, legumes, vegetables, and the occasional meat. But their most distinctive food was something most people wouldn't expect: plant ash, a drink made from bone ash or plant ash mixed with water or vinegar. It sounds strange today, but ancient doctors believed it strengthened bones. And remarkably, osteological studies show that gladiators had exceptionally dense bones, denser than most soldiers. Their bodies were both strong and durable, a rare combination. Food wasn't about indulgence. It was about fuel. Energy for endless repetition, energy for the weapon, energy for the shield, energy for tomorrow. 9. Mental training. The warrior mindset. Physical strength alone couldn't save a man in the arena. Gladiators needed a mind that could survive fear. They practiced breath control, visualization, stoic acceptance. They rehearsed the arena in their heads. They pictured their footwork, their strikes, their reactions to danger. They meditated on death, not morbidly, but with calm acceptance. To the gladiator, death wasn't a threat. It was a possibility, a reality to be acknowledged, not feared. And this acceptance created an inner stillness that modern athletes would recognize instantly. The ability to stay calm under pressure, the ability to regulate fear, the ability to move without hesitation. In the quiet moments of training, the mind became sharper than the blade. Evening conditioning, the final burn. The day ended with conditioning, long cycles of repetitive exercises designed to empty whatever strength remained. Carrying heavy loads, doing long sets of squats, holding the shield high for minutes at a time, running laps around the yard until the legs felt carved from stone. This wasn't punishment. This was preparation. The arena did not forgive weakness. Fatigue killed. So they trained the body to go beyond its limits. And when the day finally ended, gladiators walked to the baths, muscles trembling, lungs tired, bodies covered in dust. They washed their wounds, massaged their sore arms, ate their evening meals, and lay down under the dim lamplight. Tomorrow they would do it again, and again, and again, until the body changed, until the mind sharpened, until survival became instinct. 11. The hidden wisdom of gladiator training. The deeper we look into gladiator training, the more we uncover powerful truths that apply even today. Strength isn't built by machines, it's built by movements. Endurance isn't forged by intensity, it's forged by repetition. Power doesn't come from muscles, it comes from technique. Courage doesn't come from fearlessness, it comes from preparation. And survival doesn't come from luck, it comes from discipline. Gladiators lived by these truths. They didn't train to impress, they trained to live. Their body weight routines, their weapon drills, their footwork, their breath, their discipline. These were not just workouts, they were philosophies. The modern world worships comfort. The ancient world demanded resilience. Gladiators couldn't afford luxury, so they created something better, simplicity. And in that simplicity, they found power. 12. The final message, living better, not just longer. As we leave the gladiator school behind and walk back into the modern world, one truth follows us like a ghost from the past. The strongest people in history didn't train for aesthetics. They trained for life, for purpose, for something bigger than themselves. Gladiators remind us that strength is not about looking powerful. It's about becoming capable, becoming adaptable, becoming resilient in the face of hardship. Their training was painful, repetitive, exhausting, but it forged a spirit that few humans today can imagine. And maybe that is the lesson we're meant to carry. Not that we should train like gladiators, but that we should live like them, focused, disciplined, connected to our bodies, unafraid of struggle, ready for the battles we face, whether they happen in an arena or in our everyday lives. In the end, the gladiator's legacy is not brutality. It is transformation. A reminder that a simple life, lived with intention and courage, can build a strength that echoes across centuries. And perhaps the true message is this: live not just to survive, but to become someone worth remembering. They say the modern human struggles to walk 10,000 steps a day. Yet 2,000 years ago, a Roman legionnaire routinely marched more than 30 kilometers before noon, carrying the weight of a full-grown man on his back, and then still had enough strength left to build a camp, train with his weapons, and prepare for battle. And here's the surprising truth hidden beneath that image. None of these men ever set foot in anything resembling a gym. No machines, no dumbbells, no protein shakes, just discipline, the weight of survival, and a lifestyle that turned ordinary farmers into some of the most physically efficient warriors in history. Their secret wasn't a workout routine. It was a way of life that modern science is only just beginning to understand. And when you look closely, you'll see a blueprint for strength that is more human, more natural, and more practical than anything you'd find in a fitness center today. To understand how these men became what historians call human tanks, we have to step back into a world where strength wasn't a hobby or a luxury, but the difference between life and death. The Roman legionnaire didn't train to look strong. He trained to endure, to outlast, to survive. His body was carved not for aesthetics, but for purpose. And maybe, just maybe, that's why their methods still feel so relevant today, because they were designed not for trophies, but for real life. Picture it. Dawn in the ancient world. The air still cool, the sky still pale blue, the smell of damp earth rising as thousands of boots scrape the ground in unison. Each step hits with the dull thud of leather sandals reinforced with iron nails. The weight is crushing. A shield, a helmet, 2 javelins, a short sword, food rations, tools, stakes for building a fort, personal belongings, and sometimes even parts of a siege weapon. In total, 30 to 45 kilograms. And yet this was considered normal, expected, required. This is the first truth the Roman legion teaches us. Strength is built not by complicated exercises, but by repeating simple actions under meaningful weight. The human body responds to stress, not equipment. It adapts to the loads we place on it. And the legionnaire's life placed a load on every hour of his day. The first great lesson of Roman strength is the power of marching. It sounds simple, almost too ordinary, but this was the backbone of their conditioning. These were not leisurely strolls. They were brutal time-controlled marches, often 20 to 30 kilometers in 5 hours, carrying gear heavier than most modern soldiers carry. The pace was relentless, the terrain unpredictable, and the expectations strict. Fall behind, and you weren't just weak, you were a liability. Modern exercise science would call this Zone 2 endurance with loaded carries. But that phrase doesn't capture the visceral reality of it. Imagine the burn in your calves as the miles drag on, the ache in your shoulders from the straps biting into your skin, the rhythm of your breathing syncing with the person beside you until the whole column moves like a single giant organism. Over days and weeks, something remarkable happens. The hips strengthen, the lower back becomes resilient, the feet harden, and the cardiovascular system transforms. It's the kind of fitness you can't fake. You earn it with every step. But marching was just the foundation. The deeper magic of Roman conditioning happened once they reached their destination. Instead of resting, the first order of business was to build a camp. Every single day, even if they had marched for hours. Digging trenches, lifting timber, carrying stones, swinging hammers, leveling ground. A Roman soldier could set up a fully fortified camp for thousands of men in mere hours. It was architecture powered by muscle, teamwork powered by repetition. And here lies the second lesson. Strength grows fastest when it is intertwined with necessity, not vanity. The legionnaires were accidentally doing what modern trainers now call functional fitness. Only theirs truly had a function. Every swing of the pickaxe was a triceps workout. Every shovel full of dirt was a core rotation drill. Every log lifted was a deadlift before deadlifts existed. The variety of movements protected the body from imbalance, the volume made them nearly unbreakable, and the daily repetition embedded durability into their bones. And the science is clear. Multi-directional, real-world movement builds the kind of strength that lasts. But it wasn't just endurance or labor that made them strong. The most fascinating part of the Roman training system was the practice weapon. The typical gladius weighed around 1 kilogram, but the training version, 2 to 3 times heavier. The shield too was weighted, designed to challenge the shoulders, forearms, and grip far more than the real thing. The Romans believed that if you could master your weapon under exaggerated difficulty, you would be unstoppable with the real one. It was the ancient version of resistance training, disguised inside the art of war. Imagine stepping into a dusty training yard. You grip a wooden sword so heavy it pulls your arm downward. A centurion stands before you like a stone statue, watching, silent. Your task: strike the wooden post again and again, high, low, right, left, until your shoulders shake and your lungs burn. This was not about elegance. It was about control, power, precision under fatigue. And in every strike, the body learned a lesson. The shoulder stabilizers had to fire, the core had to brace, the hips had to rotate, the legs had to anchor. It was full-body training without a single machine in sight. From this comes the third great Roman lesson. Strength is not separate from skill. It is fused with it. The modern world boxes fitness into categories: strength training, cardio, sports-specific drills. But in ancient Rome, every movement was all three at once. When you train the body and the mind together, adaptation multiplies. Yet the Romans didn't stop at weapons practice. They had a full suite of calisthenic drills that would make a modern athlete gasp. Running in armor, bounding exercises to strengthen the ankles and calves, jumping across trenches, crawling under obstacles, carrying comrades on their back to build resilience and teamwork. And then there were the squats. Endless bodyweight squats performed before, during, and after training. The Romans knew instinctively what science later proved. Squats are the foundation of lower body strength, functional stability, and explosive power. Their training wasn't flashy, it wasn't complicated, but it was brutally effective. And there's something refreshing about that in a world drowning in fitness trends and gadgets. Sometimes simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. The fourth lesson emerges from the heart of Roman discipline. Consistency is more powerful than intensity. A legionnaire didn't train for 3 months before battle. His life was the training. The daily grind of movement, labor, marching, and drills built a baseline of strength that didn't disappear when stress increased. It amplified. Modern fitness culture tends to chase rapid transformations, but the Romans show us the value of long-term investment. Strength built slowly is strength that lasts. But no documentary about Roman physical conditioning would be complete without talking about one of their most overlooked tools, the Roman shield. The scutum was enormous, almost as tall as the man holding it, and weighed around 10 kilograms. Using it in combat wasn't just about defense. It required explosive pushing power, shoulder stabilization, rotational strength, and coordinated footwork. There is no perfect modern equivalent. Imagine holding a flat, curved piece of wood and iron the size of a small door and then sprinting forward into an opponent while absorbing their counterforce. It was strength training disguised as survival. Here we find the fifth lesson. The human body is strongest when it learns to move with external objects, not in isolation. Pushing, pulling, bracing, maneuvering. Real strength is not found in isolated muscle groups, but in the coordination between them. Let's make this more vivid. Picture a legion in testudo formation, the famed tortoise. Shields lock overhead and in front, forming an impenetrable wall. To maintain this position while advancing under enemy fire required staggering muscular endurance. The shoulders burned, the core trembled, the thighs screamed, but the line had to hold. A single collapse could break the formation. So they pushed through the shaking, through the fear, through the fatigue. This reveals the sixth lesson. The greatest physical transformations happen when discipline overrides discomfort. The legionnaire wasn't superhuman. He was simply trained to keep going when others stopped. And that mindset built a level of resilience deeper than muscle. But what about food? Did their diet support such brutal physical demands? Surprisingly, yes, though not in the way modern athletes might imagine. A legionnaire's diet centered around grains, vegetables, olive oil, dried fruits, cheese, and occasional meat. High in complex carbohydrates, moderate in protein, and rich in anti-inflammatory fats. Modern nutritional science would call it near perfect for endurance, recovery, and stable energy. They fueled like marathon runners long before the concept existed. This is the seventh lesson. The simplest foods often provide the most sustainable energy. The Roman soldier didn't rely on supplements or stimulants. He ate whole foods, drank water, and moved all day. His body thrived because it wasn't overloaded with excess. So when we put all of this together, the marching, the digging, the drilling, the squatting, the shield work, the consistency, the food, and the unbreakable discipline, we begin to understand how the Roman legionnaire became a symbol of human potential. He wasn't stronger because he had better training equipment. He was stronger because his life demanded that he show up day after day in the face of fatigue, weather, danger, and fear. That is the part that hits hardest. Strength wasn't optional. strength was survival, and yet even in the modern world, where survival no longer depends on physical resilience, we can still learn from the Roman approach. We may not need to march 30 kilometers carrying half our body weight, but we do need consistency. We need movement. We need effort that challenges us without breaking us. We need routines that build longevity, not just aesthetics. The final message of the Roman legionnaire is not a call to train harder. It's a call to live intentionally. Their strength didn't come from intensity, but from purpose. They understood that every step, every strike, every shovel of earth contributed to something larger than themselves. Their bodies weren't monuments, they were instruments. So as you come to the end of this story, think about what it means to be strong in a world that no longer forces you to be. Think about the power of choosing movement instead of comfort. Think about the quiet discipline of building something a day at a time. Strength, after all, isn't measured by the weight you lift, but by the weight you can carry through the challenges of life. And maybe that's the real secret of the Roman legionnaire. He shows us that the ultimate goal isn't to live longer, but to live better, to live with resilience, to live with purpose, to live with a body that supports your dreams instead of limiting them. The Roman didn't train for glory, he trained for readiness. And in that readiness, he found a kind of freedom. You don't need a gym to follow that path. You just need a starting point. One step, one decision, one moment of courage. Because strength isn't born in a gym. It's born in the choices you make when no one is watching. The Romans knew it, and deep down, so do we.
It may surprise you that the elite warriors of ancient Sparta, men whose very name has become a byword for toughness, often trained more intensely with nothing but rocks, their own bodies, and the harsh Greek sun than many modern athletes do inside glass-walled gyms. Imagine 100 young Spartans leaping from jagged boulders into frost-cold water, dragging heavy logs across dusty hillsides, gripping rough tree branches with bare hands until the skin shredded. This wasn't fitness for its own sake. It was preparing for war, for survival, for identity. And in uncovering how they built strength without machines, we unearth something simple and profound. Lasting power doesn't require fancy tools, just purposeful movement, discipline, and a relationship with your body that feels more like stewardship than spectacle. In this journey, we'll wander through 7 revelations, 7 habits that underpinned the Spartan way of forging bodies and minds. We'll dive into the context of a society designed around combat, explore the science that echoes through muscle fibers and neural pathways, peer into cultural practices that shaped generations, and then extract, for you, take-home insights that apply in our modern world. This is both archaeology and inspiration, calm observation and emotional invitation. Let us begin. 1. Embracing the body as weapon. In Sparta, the body was not a vanity project. It was the primary tool of survival. Boys were taken from their homes at age 7 and entered the agoge, a harsh training system that stripped comforts and exposed them to fatigue, cold, hunger, and pain. Their instructors weren't kind. Every stumble or sign of weakness was a lesson. They jumped into icy rivers, ran up hills dragging sacks, performed push-up-like dips on logs. Strong limbs weren't built by machines, but by brutal, simple motion. Modern science tells us why. Calisthenics, the use of one's own body weight, activates stabilizing muscles, build neural efficiency, strengthen tendons and ligaments, coordinate muscle groups, rather than isolating them. Studies show body weight training improves functional strength, how you use your body in real life. When the Spartans vaulted rocks or hiked with packs, they were performing compound, full-body work integrated with outdoor rhythms. The takeaway: you don't need fancy equipment to build meaningful strength. Your body is the best gym you'll ever have, so treat it like the tool it really is. Use it, challenge it, train it with purpose. 2. leveraging the environment as training ground. Picture a sloping hill just east of the Eurotas, the young Spartan dragging a log the size of his torso uphill, sweat stinging his eyes, sun baking his back. There were no treadmills, no weight racks, just the land itself. The Spartans carved their training into the terrain. Dunes, rocks, rivers, open fields. Today, research shows training outdoors confers mental benefits. Sunlight, fresh air, uneven terrain engage proprioception and coordination. When you're moving over shifting ground, your balance muscles light up. When you haul stones, you recruit the full posterior chain, not just your glutes and hamstrings, but also your core, your grip, your mind, coordinating the lift. The Spartans didn't pull up in a gym. They climbed, jumped, sprinted, carried. The takeaway: when you step outside your familiar gym bubble, you tap into a richer training environment. Use stairs, logs, uneven ground, natural resistance. Let the world become your trainer. 3. Cultivating endurance through discomfort. Endurance in Sparta wasn't optional. It was the bedrock of battle readiness. They ran barefoot, in minimal rags, across rough terrain. They spent nights exposed to the elements, hungered yet alert, ready at dawn. Their tolerance for discomfort was a program. Today, endurance science emphasizes not only heart and lungs, but the mind's role in tolerating discomfort, in sustaining effort when fatigue whispers, "Stop." Functional strength depends on cardiovascular capacity, yes, but also on the ability to persist. Imagine dusk in Laconia. The young warrior's legs heavy, his lungs burning, yet he still must sprint, jump, cover distance, carrying a spear. The environment punished softness. The takeaway: building endurance isn't just about long runs or machines, it's about training under realistic constraints, moving when tired, carrying load, adapting to discomfort. Embrace a session when you're slightly worn. Let that discomfort teach you depth. 4. Prioritizing grip, feet, and foundational strength. We often think of arms or chest when picturing strong, but the Spartans understood something deeper. Strength starts from contact. They trained in the dirt. They wrestled barefoot. They gripped rocks and spears until their hands were calloused. Their feet were strong and nimble from barefoot running over stones. Science now confirms grip strength predicts lifespan. Foot musculature and ankle stability affect posture, balance, even spinal health. The chain begins at ground zero, feet pushing off, ankles absorbing shock, hands gripping, linking to shoulders, back, core. When one of these links is weak, everything adjusts poorly. The Spartans embodied total body integrity. The takeaway: don't skip foundational work. Barefoot walks, farmers' carries, rock holds, pull-ups, ankle work, they matter. Build strength from the ground up, and you'll carry everything else more powerfully. 5. Integrating mobility, agility, and explosive power. Gladiator-style bulk wasn't the goal for a Spartan. They needed to move, turn, dodge, sprint, strike. They vaulted walls, launched spears, shifted weight in wrestling matches. Their training included long strides, jump landings, quick changes of direction, bodyweight agility drills. Modern research confirms power is about speed plus strength. The rapid activation of muscle fibers, neuromuscular coordination, elastic recoil. The Spartans trained that every day. Jump, land, twist, sprint, recover. The landscape forced them to adapt constantly. Visualize the fall of dusk, a thunderous sprint across field, then bounding over fallen tree trunks, then back into formation. The muscles weren't just big, they were electric. The takeaway: include mobility and explosiveness. Don't just lift heavy, move light and fast sometimes. Jump, bound, twist, sprint. Let the body feel speed, not just load. 6. Community, accountability, and ritualized intensity. The hardest part of the Spartan system wasn't the rocks or cold water, it was the social structure. A boy didn't train alone. He trained with a dozen companions under the ever-watchful eye of an elder. He faced embarrassment and reward in front of his peers. The system used shame, honor, collective expectation. Sprung from childhood, this created absolute accountability. They didn't quit. Modern behavioral science tells us that environment and social context shape habits more than willpower alone. Group exercise, shared tough missions, ritualized repetition, they change the brain. Muscles respond, yes, but the deeper adaptation happens in the mind. I am one of the warriors. I will show up. I will not fail in front of my comrades. That creates resilience. The takeaway: create community around your movement. Find a partner, train in group, make a pact. Turn your workouts into a ritual, a shared story. It's not just you and your dumbbells, it's you and your tribe, your standard. 7. Applying strength to life, not just lifting weights. This is the hidden truth. In Sparta, strength was never an end in itself. It was a means to life, to freedom, to survival. The warrior's body was meant to leap embankments, fell enemies, haul supplies, survive the siege. In peace, they hunted and farmed. The strength they built was practical, rooted in purpose. Today, we might train to look good or compete, but what if we trained to live fully? Science suggests that functional full-body strength reduces injury risk, improves mobility, increases longevity, and enhances quality of life. Picture an older person with a strong grip, sturdy ankles, resilient joints. They bend to tie laces, chase after grandchildren, help a stranger in need. That's the real test of strength. Can your body serve you? The Spartans lived for the day when their bodies had to give everything. So they trained accordingly. The takeaway: let your training connect to life. Ask, what do I need my body for? How can I be of service, experience more, not just lift more? Strength is to enable living, not restrict it. And now, as we draw this journey to a close, let's return to the image of that Spartan boy in the twilight hours of his training. Muddy footfalls echoing on the stone path, sweat dripping from his brow, heart pounding. Not because he wants a six-pack, but because his body is his instrument, and his life demands its full capability. What if we carried that philosophy into our own lives? What if each rep, each motion, each breath became a reaffirmation? I am alive, I am capable, I am preparing not for the gym selfie, but for the rich experience of living. Training like the Spartans doesn't mean recreating ancient rituals in a vacuum. It means adopting their spirit, movement that matters, challenges that stretch beyond comfort, connection with others, with the ground beneath our feet, with the real world we inhabit. It means recognizing that our bodies are not decorations, but instruments, that strength is not vanity, but capability, that discipline is not punishment, but freedom. In the end, what I hope you carry from this is not a rigid program or a checklist, but a vision of your body as an ally, your movement as expression, and your strength as service. The Spartans taught that fallible humanity could rise to extraordinary power through simple, persistent action. You don't need gym machines, fancy equipment, or luxury settings. You just need intention, consistency, courage to push when it hurts, companionship to hold you accountable, and the land beneath your feet to remind you you are alive. So go outside, pick up a rock, walk barefoot over grass, or stones. Run until your lungs burn and your mind says, no. Laugh at the pain, learn from it. Train with a friend. Make movement your ritual. Let your body become strong. Not just for appearances, but so you can reach further, live deeper, serve others, and meet each day not just with a sigh, it's okay, but with a roar. Because strength, built in the chorus of sun and wind, sweat and stone, carries a resonance no gym can replicate. This is your invitation to build strength that matters in a life that matters. If the Spartans could drag boulders up hills and run barefoot into the cold dawn, we too can summon our ancestors of effort, not for war, but for living. And in that challenge, we find something richer than muscle. We find ourselves. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for videos.
More than 2,000 years ago, Roman soldiers, battle-hardened men who conquered half the known world, wrote something unsettling in their war journals. They were not afraid of monsters. They were afraid of naked men painted in blue, screaming into the fog, sprinting downhill with weapons raised, stronger, faster, and more relentless than anything Rome had faced before. That fear had nothing to do with magic. It came from how the Celts trained their bodies. This is the forgotten fitness system of the Celtic warrior. No gyms, no routines written on paper, no mirrors, just nature, necessity, and a brutal understanding of how the human body becomes dangerous, resilient, and alive. Modern fitness culture tells us strength is built in buildings, with machines that isolate muscles and numbers that measure progress. But the Celts believed something radically different. Strength was not about looking powerful. It was about surviving chaos, balance on wet stone, endurance in freezing rain, explosive force after hours of marching, calm breath while your heart hammered against your ribs. And here is the hidden truth most people never hear. The human body did not evolve for treadmills or cable machines. It evolved for uneven ground, unpredictable loads, sudden violence, and long days without rest. The Celtic warriors didn't train to be fit. They trained to be unbreakable. To understand their method, we must step away from the modern world and into a land of cold rivers, dense forests, and rolling hills soaked with rain. A land where every movement mattered and weakness was punished immediately. This is where functional strength was born. The first lesson of Celtic fitness begins with movement through terrain. Long before structured exercise existed, Celtic warriors walked, ran, climbed, and carried across vast landscapes. Archaeological evidence suggests warriors regularly covered over 20 miles a day, often while armed. This wasn't cardio for the sake of endurance. This was conditioning under load. Modern science confirms what they lived daily. Studies show that loaded walking builds joint integrity, strengthens connective tissue, and improves cardiovascular efficiency far better than steady-state running alone. Walking with weight forces the body to stabilize itself naturally, activating deep muscles that machines often ignore. For the Celts, hills were their stair machines. Forest floors were their balance trainers. Rivers were resistance pools that fought every step forward. Each journey hardened the feet, strengthened the ankles, and trained the nervous system to adapt instantly. The takeaway is simple and uncomfortable. Real fitness begins when the ground beneath you is unpredictable. Walk more. Carry weight. Choose uneven paths. Let nature challenge your balance and coordination instead of removing it. The second lesson lies in how they built raw strength without lifting iron plates. Celtic warriors trained with objects that fought back. Stones torn from riverbeds, logs soaked with water, weapons heavier than anything you'd find in a modern gym. Lifting a stone is not like lifting a dumbbell. It has no handle. Its weight shifts. Its surface tears into your palms. The body must recruit stabilizers, grip strength, core tension, and full body coordination all at once. Modern research on odd object lifting shows higher muscle activation and greater neurological demand compared to standardized weights. This is why Celtic strength looked different. It wasn't symmetrical or polished. It was dense, functional, alive. Their backs were built by lifting fallen trees, their shoulders by throwing spears and swinging blades, their legs by squatting with uneven loads, not perfect barbells. The science backs it up. Irregular resistance improves proprioception, injury resistance, and real-world power transfer. The body learns to generate force in chaos, not controlled environments. The takeaway is timeless. If your strength only works in a gym, it is incomplete. Lift awkward things. Carry uneven loads. Let your grip burn. Your body will adapt the way it was designed to. The third lesson reveals itself in how the Celts trained balance and agility. Ancient accounts describe warriors practicing footwork drills on narrow ridges, fallen trees, and river stones. Balance wasn't optional. A slip in battle meant death. Modern neuroscience tells us balance training strengthens neural pathways between the brain and muscles, improving reaction time and coordination. It also slows age-related decline far more effectively than isolated strength training. For Celtic warriors, balance was trained constantly without conscious effort, crossing streams, climbing rocky hills, fighting on slippery ground. Their nervous systems were sharp because they lived in environments that demanded constant awareness. Imagine training barefoot on grass, mud, and stone. Every muscle in your foot waking up. Ankles learning to react instantly. Hips stabilizing naturally. This is how humans evolved to move. The takeaway is powerful. Balance is not a separate skill. It is the foundation of strength. Train where falling is possible. Your brain and body will become faster, smarter, and more resilient. The fourth lesson is endurance built through suffering, not repetition. Celtic warriors endured cold rain, hunger, and exhaustion as part of training. They swam icy rivers. They marched through storms. They slept on the ground. Cold exposure, now popularized through modern science, was a daily reality for them. Research shows cold exposure improves circulation, increases mental resilience, and strengthens immune response. Endurance wasn't trained in controlled intervals. It was forged through discomfort. This created warriors who did not panic under stress. Their nervous systems were accustomed to hardship. When battle came, their bodies didn't freeze. They adapted. Modern life removes nearly all physical stressors, temperature-controlled rooms, constant food, soft surfaces. The Celtic way reminds us that controlled discomfort builds extraordinary resilience. The takeaway is not to suffer endlessly, but to embrace discomfort deliberately. Cold water, hard terrain, occasional hunger. These are ancient tools for modern strength. The fifth lesson lies in combat conditioning itself. Celtic warriors trained through mock combat, wrestling, and weapon drills. Wrestling built grip strength, spatial awareness, and explosive power. Weapon training conditions shoulders, wrists, and core in rotational patterns unmatched by modern machines. These movements trained what scientists call kinetic chains, the transfer of power through the body. Rotational training has been shown to improve athletic performance and reduce injury risk. The Celts understood this intuitively. They didn't isolate muscles. They trained movement, striking, twisting, bracing, recovering. Fighting was their conditioning, and conditioning was their survival. The takeaway is clear. Your body is not a collection of parts. It is a system. Train movements, not muscles. The sixth lesson reveals the role of breath and mind. Ancient Celtic rituals included rhythmic chanting, controlled breathing, and trance-like focus before battle. This wasn't superstition. It was nervous system regulation. Modern science confirms breath control directly influences heart rate variability, stress response, and endurance. Warriors who controlled their breath controlled their fear. They could fight longer, think clearer, and recover faster. Breathing wasn't something separate from training. It was embedded in every movement, every march, every fight. The takeaway is subtle but profound. Strength without calm is fragile. Learn to breathe under pressure. The final lesson is perhaps the most important. Celtic fitness was never about vanity. It was about belonging. Training happened in tribes, not alone. Strength was shared. Suffering was communal. Studies show social training environments increase adherence, resilience, and mental health. Humans are tribal creatures. The Celts trained together because survival depended on it. Modern fitness often isolates us. headphones on, eyes down. The Celtic way reminds us that strength grows faster when shared, and so we return to the image that haunted Rome. Warriors charging through mist, bodies hardened by nature, minds sharpened by hardship, breath steady, balance sure, strength forged not in gyms, but in life itself. The Celtic warrior fitness method is not lost. It has simply been buried under comfort. You don't need ancient bloodlines or sacred rituals. You need movement, challenge, discomfort, and purpose. Walk farther. Lift awkward things. Train in nature. Breathe deeply. Seek balance. Share the journey. Because real fitness is not about living longer alone. It's about living better, fully present, resilient, and alive in a body that remembers what it was built to do. And somewhere, in the quiet strength of your own effort, the old warriors would recognize you as one of their own. They thought gladiators were only men, until a scratched stone relief showed two women, armed and unbowed, facing death under the Roman sun. No mirrors, no machines, no mercy, only bodies hardened into weapons by a world that demanded survival before glory. The first surprise is not that female gladiators existed, it's that they trained at all in a society that tried to pretend they didn't. The Romans called them gladiatrices, and the evidence for their lives is scarce by design. Laws, poems, insults, a few inscriptions, a single haunting relief from Halicarnassus. Scarce evidence often hides uncomfortable truths. And the uncomfortable truth is this. Some women in the ancient world were trained to fight like professionals, without gyms, without modern equipment, and without the luxury of safety. They trained with what the earth gave them and what fear demanded. And in doing so, they discovered principles of strength that still work today. This story isn't about bloodlust, it's about adaptation. It's about how human bodies learn when there are no machines to guide them, no screens to distract them, and no soft landings to catch them. It's about the quiet science of calisthenics before the word existed, the psychology of training when failure meant pain, and the culture that shaped bodies into symbols, sometimes against their will, sometimes with fierce intent. The mystery begins with absence. Why do we know so little about gladiatrices? Because Rome was deeply uncomfortable with them. A woman fighting in the arena cracked the image of Roman order. It blurred lines between masculine and feminine, citizen and slave, performer and warrior. So the records are thin, the references dismissive, the tone often mocking. But the body doesn't lie. Muscles leave traces on bones. Training leaves habits in movement, and the arena itself tells us what kind of strength was required to survive it. Imagine the training yard at dawn, not marble and mirrors, but dirt packed hard by years of feet. The air smells of iron, sweat, and old wood. In the distance, the city wakes. Here, there are no spectators yet, only repetition, only breath. The first lesson the gladiatrix learned was balance, because balance is the foundation of violence and grace alike. In the arena, footing meant life. Sand shifted. Blood made the ground slick. Armor changed your center of gravity. So training began not with lifting, but with standing. Long hours barefoot on uneven ground. 1 foot raised, then switched. Knees slightly bent. Core awake, eyes forward. The body learned to make micro corrections without conscious thought. Modern science calls this proprioception, the body's ability to sense itself in space. Ancient trainers didn't need the word. They knew the result. A fighter who could move without thinking had time to think about the opponent. Balance drills bled into walking patterns, then into lunges that mimicked the step and strike of combat. Forward, back, diagonal. Always controlled, always repeatable. These weren't exercises for show. They were rehearsals for chaos. Today, we know that such movements strengthen stabilizing muscles often ignored by machine-based training. Then they simply knew that fighters who fell died faster. As the sun climbed, training turned heavier, not with barbells but with bodies. The gladiatrix learned to carry weight because combat demanded it. Shields pulled at the shoulder. Helmets strained the neck. Opponents leaned, shoved, locked arms. So they carried water jars across the yard. They hauled sandbags made of stitched leather and grit. They dragged wooden sleds over dirt until legs burned and lungs screamed. Functional load, modern trainers would call it. Ancient necessity is more accurate. What's remarkable is how closely this mirrors what exercise science now praises: compound movements, full body engagement, variable resistance. When you lift a jar that sloshes, your muscles learn to adapt mid-movement. When you drag weight over ground, your posterior chain, the muscles of the back, hips, and legs, awakens as a system, not a collection of parts. The gladiatrix didn't train muscles. She trained actions. But strength without endurance is a promise you can't keep. Fights didn't end in 30 seconds. They stretched, they stalled, they turned into tests of breath and will. So conditioning was relentless. Running wasn't done for distance alone, but for rhythm. Short sprints followed by slow recovery walks, again and again. The heart learned to surge and settle. The lungs learned to work under stress. This is interval training by another name, and it remains one of the most efficient ways to build cardiovascular power. There was also crawling, low to the ground. Elbows and knees scraping dirt. It built shoulders and hips, yes, but more than that, it taught humility. In combat, you fall. You get pushed down, you scramble. The body that has practiced being low doesn't panic when it happens for real. Modern movement specialists praise crawling for neurological development and joint health. Ancient trainers valued it because it kept fighters alive. Food followed training, and food was fuel, not pleasure. Gladiators, men and women alike, were often fed diets heavy in barley, beans, and legumes. High in carbohydrates, dense in calories, cheap to produce. Ancient writers mocked them as barley eaters, but that mockery hides a truth. Carbohydrates replenish glycogen, the energy stored in muscles. Fighters needed that energy for repeated exertion. Bones found in gladiator cemeteries show higher mineral content, likely from ash-based supplements that boosted calcium intake. Even here in the margins of history, we see applied nutrition without the language to describe it. Recovery existed too, though it looked different from ice baths and foam rollers. Massage with oils, passive stretching, time, sleep when possible, wounds treated with herbs and experience. The body repaired itself as bodies always have, given half a chance. But recovery was never guaranteed. The pressure to perform was constant, and that pressure shaped the mind as much as the body. Here lies the second hidden truth. Training was psychological long before it was physical. To step into the arena as a woman meant carrying the weight of spectacle. Crowds didn't just want skill, they wanted transgression. The gladiatrix trained under eyes that doubted her existence. That doubt could crush you or harden you. Mental conditioning came through ritual. Repetition built confidence. Familiar routines before training and before combat created islands of control in a life defined by uncertainty. Visualization likely played a role, even if unspoken. Fighters rehearsed movements in their minds because they rehearsed them in their bodies every day. Modern neuroscience confirms what ancient trainers sensed. Mental rehearsal activates many of the same neural pathways as physical practice. You become what you repeatedly imagine yourself doing. Weapons training blended seamlessly with bodyweight work. Wooden swords heavier than their metal counterparts were swung thousands of times. The extra weight made real weapons feel light. This principle, overload followed by ease, is timeless. Swinging trained the shoulders, the grip, the torso's rotation. Striking posts toughened hands and wrists. The body adapted to impact gradually, building resilience rather than breaking. For gladiatrices, armor added another layer of challenge. Chest protection, greaves, helmets, all altered movement. Training with armor meant learning to breathe under constraint. Shorter breaths, controlled exhales. Panic wastes oxygen, calm conserves it. Today, athletes use altitude masks and resistance breathing to simulate stress. Then they used iron. As days blurred into months, the body transformed. Lean, powerful, efficient. Not sculpted for beauty, but carved by function. This is where modern assumptions falter. We often imagine ancient training as crude, brutal, unsophisticated. In reality, it was ruthlessly optimized. There was no room for wasted effort. Every drill answered a question. Will this keep you alive? The cultural context matters here. Gladiatrices were rare, expensive, and controversial. Some fought for survival, others possibly for fame or patronage. The motivations varied. But the system they trained in did not. It cared only about performance. In that sense, the arena was brutally meritocratic. Skill mattered, conditioning mattered, composure mattered. Gender did not save you. This leads us to the third lesson. Strength is specific. Gladiatresses did not train to lift the heaviest possible weight once. They trained to move a moderate load repeatedly under stress in unpredictable conditions. This kind of strength, sometimes called work capacity, is deeply transferable. It's the strength you use to carry groceries upstairs, to work long hours on your feet, to respond when life pushes unexpectedly hard. Science now supports what the arena demanded. Studies show that bodyweight training can build comparable strength and endurance to machine-based workouts, especially when movements are varied and progressively challenging. Balance, coordination, and joint health often improve more with free movement than with guided paths. The ancient world, constrained by lack of equipment, stumbled into principles modern fitness is rediscovering. But there was a cost. Injuries accumulated, joints wore down, scars layered over scars. Training without safety nets means mistakes are expensive. And yet there is something deeply human in this stripped-down approach. It forces honesty. You can't hide weakness behind numbers or machines. Your body tells the truth every morning when you stand up and every night when you lie down. As the years passed, a veteran gladiatrix moved differently. Economical, calm, she wasted nothing. Younger fighters might burn hot and fade. Experience taught restraint. This is another quiet truth. Longevity in any demanding practice comes not from intensity alone, but from judgment. Knowing when to push, knowing when to hold back, knowing that tomorrow matters. The story doesn't end in the arena. It echoes forward. Medieval soldiers trained with bodyweight drills and weapon work. Farmers built strength through labor. Sailors learned balance on shifting decks. Only recently have we outsourced movement to machines and forgotten that the body itself is the oldest gym. So what can we take from the gladiatrix beyond fascination? The takeaway is not to romanticize suffering. It is to respect simplicity, to remember that strength is a relationship between body and environment. When you move with intention, when you load the body naturally, when you train balance and breath and focus together, you tap into something ancient and reliable. You don't need marble floors or polished steel to become strong. You need consistency. You need awareness. You need the courage to be present with effort. The gladiatrix trained without gyms because there were none. And in that absence, she learned to listen to her body with clarity we often lose amid convenience. In a world obsessed with optimization, her story whispers a different message. Train for life, not for appearance. Build capacity, not just power. Cultivate calm alongside strength, because the goal was never just to survive the fight. It was to walk out changed, still standing, ready for whatever came next. And perhaps that is the final lesson. We admire the gladiatrix not because she lived dangerously, but because she adapted intelligently. She used what she had. She trained for reality, not fantasy. And in doing so, she reminds us that living better, truly better, is not about adding more, but about using what's already within reach, with discipline, humility, and purpose. Most people imagine medieval knights training by lifting iron swords and smashing shields together. But here's the shock. Some of the strongest, most resilient bodies in human history were built not in battle, but while scrubbing floors, chasing animals through forests, and carrying water up cold stone stairs before sunrise. Picture a gray dawn breaking over a medieval castle. The air smells of damp stone, wood smoke, and wet earth. Before a single sword is drawn, bodies are already at work. This is the hidden world of medieval fitness, a world without gyms, protein powders, or workout plans, yet one that forged men capable of wearing 60 pounds of armor for hours and still fighting with precision. The mystery is simple and profound. How did they do it, and what can it teach us about our own bodies today? The answer lies not in heroic myths, but in unexpected everyday movement. When we strip away the romance of knights and look closely at their lives, we discover something deeply human and strangely modern. Their strength was not built through isolated exercises, but through a life designed around movement, purpose, and adaptation. And in that truth is a lesson that quietly challenges almost everything we assume about fitness today. The first lesson begins not on the battlefield, but in childhood. A future knight did not wake up one day and decide to train. His body was shaped slowly, almost invisibly, through years of daily labor and play. As boys, they ran across uneven fields, climbed trees, wrestled friends in the dirt, and learned to fall without fear. Medieval childhood was not sedentary. There were no chairs designed for comfort, no long hours hunched over screens. Movement was constant, varied, and often unplanned. Modern research calls this movement variability, and it turns out to be one of the most powerful builders of long-term resilience. Studies in biomechanics show that bodies exposed to many different movement patterns develop stronger joints, better balance, and more adaptable muscles. Knights didn't train balance boards, but they walked on muddy roads, icy stones, and narrow staircases daily. Their ankles, knees, and hips learned stability the hard way, through experience rather than instruction. By the time a boy became a squire, his body already carried a quiet strength. As a squire, his workouts became even more unexpected. He carried water, hauled firewood, cleaned armor, saddled horses, and followed his knight everywhere on foot. Imagine carrying heavy metal gear up spiral staircases carved into stone, again and again, day after day. This was loaded stair climbing, one of the most effective cardiovascular and leg-strengthening exercises known today. Sports scientists now know that carrying uneven loads improves core stability and grip strength far better than the symmetrical weights. Knights and squires rarely carried perfectly balanced loads. Armor pieces shifted, buckets sloshed, weapons pulled at one side of the body. Their cores learned to stabilize instinctively. Their hands grew strong, not from squeezing stress balls, but from gripping leather straps, reins, and cold steel in all weather. The second lesson emerges from the armor itself. Plate armor is often imagined as stiff and restrictive, but well-made armor was surprisingly mobile. To fight effectively, a knight had to squat, lunge, twist, crawl, and stand up repeatedly while wearing it. Simply standing up after a fall in armor required explosive strength and coordination. This wasn't just strength training, it was functional movement under load. Modern fitness research shows that training movements, rather than muscles, leads to better real-world performance and fewer injuries. Knights lived this principle without knowing its name. Their bodies learned to move efficiently under stress, adapting to weight, resistance, and fatigue as part of daily life. There were no reps or sets, only necessity. Then there is the horse. Riding was not passive transportation, it was a full-body workout. Medieval saddles required the rider to stabilize constantly using their inner thighs, core, and lower back. Long hours in the saddle built endurance and postural strength. Dismounting and mounting without assistance demanded mobility and power, especially in armor. Modern electromyography studies show that horseback riding activates deep core muscles more effectively than many gym exercises. Knights didn't ride for fitness, but fitness emerged as a byproduct of skill. Their workouts were inseparable from their purpose. The third lesson comes from weapon training, but not in the way most people imagine. Sword fighting was not endless, heavy swings. It was precise, controlled, and technical. Training weapons were often lighter than battle swords, allowing for long sessions focused on accuracy and timing rather than brute force. This developed muscular endurance, coordination, and neural efficiency. Fencing manuals from the Middle Ages reveal something strikingly modern, an emphasis on footwork, angles, and rhythm. Knights train their nervous systems as much as their muscles. Today, neuroscientists know that skill-based movement improves brain health, reaction time, and cognitive longevity. The knight's mind and body were trained together, not separately, but perhaps the most surprising workouts happened far from training grounds. Hunting was a brutal, full-day physical ordeal. Tracking animals required walking for miles over rough terrain, often carrying equipment. When the moment came, it demanded explosive speed, accuracy, and control under stress. Even falconry, which appears elegant and calm, involved long walks, arm endurance from holding birds, and acute attention. This kind of endurance, built slowly over hours rather than minutes, aligns closely with what modern science calls Zone 2 training. long, steady movement that improves cardiovascular health and mitochondrial efficiency. Knights didn't wear heart rate monitors, but their lives naturally included this kind of movement. It kept their hearts strong without burning them out. The fourth lesson is humility. Knights cleaned their own gear. Armor maintenance was physically demanding, involving scrubbing, polishing, lifting, and careful inspection. These were slow, repetitive tasks requiring strength and patience. Modern occupational health studies show that light, repetitive physical work can improve circulation, joint health, and mental calm when balanced with heavier exertion. There is something meditative about this kind of work. The rhythmic scrape of cloth against steel, the smell of oil, the quiet focus. Knights found moments of stillness within effort. Their workouts were not always intense. They flowed between hard and soft, fast and slow. Food played a role too, though not in the way of modern diets. Medieval knights ate seasonal, whole foods, meat, grains, vegetables, fermented products. Their calories matched their activity. There was no constant snacking, no sugar spikes. Fasting was common due to religious practices, unintentionally supporting metabolic flexibility. Modern studies on intermittent fasting suggest benefits for insulin sensitivity and cellular repair. Knights practiced it as part of life, not optimization. The fifth lesson reveals itself in rest, or rather, the lack of artificial rest. Sleep followed the sun. Darkness meant stillness. Without artificial light, circadian rhythms stayed aligned. Recovery happened naturally. Today, sleep scientists emphasize the importance of consistent light exposure and sleep timing for muscle recovery and hormonal balance. Knights lived inside these rhythms, their bodies recovering in harmony with the environment. Community also mattered. Training was social. Sparring, riding, and work happened together. This created accountability, motivation, and emotional resilience. Social neuroscience now shows that shared physical activity increases adherence and reduces stress. Knights were never alone in their effort. The sixth lesson is adaptability. Medieval life was unpredictable. Weather changed plans, injuries happened, equipment broke. Knights learned to adjust, to move differently when hurt, to rest when necessary, to push when required. This adaptability is now considered a cornerstone of long-term physical health. Bodies that only know one type of movement break when conditions change. Knights thrive because their training was never rigid. Perhaps the most powerful lesson is the seventh, and it is quiet. Knights did not train to look strong. They trained to be useful. Strength was not aesthetic. It was functional, communal, and meaningful. Modern psychology shows that purpose-driven activity increases motivation and reduces burnout. When effort serves something larger than ego, the body responds differently. As we step back and look at the whole picture, a hidden truth emerges. Medieval knights were not strong because they trained harder. They were strong because they lived differently. Movement was woven into their days, not scheduled into an hour. Effort had meaning. Rest had rhythm. Community replaced isolation. This doesn't mean we should romanticize the past. Medieval life was harsh and often short, but within that harshness was an alignment between body, environment, and purpose that we've largely lost. The modern world offers comfort, but at the cost of movement. We sit to work, sit to eat, sit to rest, and then try to undo it all in a brief workout. The Knights remind us of something simple and radical. The body thrives on frequent, varied, meaningful movement. You don't need a castle or a sword. Carry groceries with intention. Walk on uneven ground. Play. Lift awkward objects. Learn skills. Move for purpose, not punishment. Imagine a future where fitness feels less like a chore and more like living fully, where strength is quiet confidence, endurance is patience, and health is something you build without noticing day by day. The Knights never counted calories or steps, yet their bodies told a story of resilience etched into bone and muscle. In the end, the unexpected workouts of medieval knights whisper a message across centuries. You don't need more time. You need a different relationship with movement. Live in a way that asks something of your body, and it will answer. Not just with strength, but with vitality, presence, and a deeper sense of being alive. Because the goal was never just to live longer. It was to live ready. No mirrors, no machines, no protein tubs. Yet a single Macedonian phalanx could move like a living wall of iron, advancing uphill under missile fire. Shields locked, spears level, hearts steady. The shocking truth is this: their strength wasn't built in buildings. It was built in dust, cold, hunger, and discipline. They trained without gyms, but not without science. They trained without equipment, but not without method. And somewhere between the clang of bronze and the rhythm of breath, they discovered something modern fitness is only now rediscovering: that the strongest bodies are shaped by purpose, not convenience. The mystery begins with a question that sounds almost unfair to modern ears. How did young men, many barely out of boyhood, learn to carry shields heavier than a car tire, hold spears longer than a man is tall, march for days, fight for hours, and still obey commands with precision, without barbells, treadmills, or recovery shakes? The answer isn't hidden in a secret exercise, it's hidden in a way of living. To understand the training of the Macedonian phalanx, you have to unlearn what you think training is. This wasn't a 1-hour workout squeezed between meals and sleep. It was a total environment. The body was never separated from the day. Strength wasn't something you did, it was something you became. Macedon, before it conquered the known world, was a rough land. Cold winters, hard soil, thin margins between survival and failure. Boys grew up herding animals, hauling wood, repairing walls, walking long distances over uneven ground. Modern research would call this constant low-level physical stress. Today we know that bones grow denser when they're loaded repeatedly, that tendons stiffen and strengthen through habitual strain, that coordination improves when the nervous system is challenged daily. The Macedonians didn't know the words, but they lived the truth. By the time formal military training began, the body was already conditioned, not sculpted, not optimized for aesthetics, but resilient. The first lesson wasn't how to fight, it was how to stand. Hours spent upright under load, shield strapped to the arm, spear held steady, spine tall. Posture was survival. A sagging line meant death. Modern biomechanics tells us that isometric holds under load strengthen deep stabilizing muscles better than many dynamic movements. The phalanx was an isometric masterclass disguised as warfare. And then there was marching, endless marching. Not the kind done on flat parade grounds, but over hills, mud, stones, heat, and cold. Marching with 30 kilograms of gear teaches the body to move efficiently or suffer. Oxygen use becomes economical. Feet learn to strike softly. The core learns to brace instinctively. Today, endurance scientists talk about mitochondrial density and capillary growth. Back then, they talked about keeping up or being left behind. The hidden truth is that the phalanx wasn't built on explosive power first. It was built on endurance, the ability to hold formation longer than the enemy could hold courage. Strength was layered on top of stamina, not the other way around. This flips modern training on its head, where many chase strength before resilience. The Macedonians knew that a strong man who tires is weak, but a tireless man grows terrifying. Training intensified as boys became soldiers. They drilled not with variety, but with repetition. The same movements again and again, until thought disappeared. Lock shield, step forward, lower spear, breathe. There's a modern neurological principle here. Repetition under mild stress builds myelination, the insulation around nerve fibers that makes signals faster and more reliable. In simple terms, the body learns to obey instantly. In battle, this meant a phalanx that moved like one animal, not thousands of individuals. Food was simple: barley, bread, cheese, onions, wine watered down. No calorie tracking, but constant movement ensured energy balance. Occasional hunger was normal. We now know that mild caloric stress combined with activity can improve metabolic flexibility, teaching the body to switch between fuel sources. The Macedonian soldier was metabolically adaptable by necessity. He could fight fed or hungry, rested or tired. Sleep was not optimized, but it was earned. After long days of labor and drill, sleep came fast and deep. Growth hormone pulses strongest during deep sleep, repairing muscle and connective tissue. Their recovery wasn't managed. It was enforced by exhaustion. There's a lesson here modern life resists. Sometimes the best recovery tool is honest fatigue. As training progressed, the phalanx introduced controlled brutality, shield-on-shield pushing, bodies leaning into one another, learning to absorb force without panic. This wasn't brawling, it was pressure tolerance. The nervous system learns what stress feels like, and then learns it won't die from it. Modern psychologists call this stress inoculation. Macedonian soldiers simply called it becoming steady. Breathing was never taught as a technique, yet it was trained relentlessly. Marching, holding, pushing, fighting, all demanded rhythmic breath. Those who gasped panicked. Those who breathed survived. Today, studies show that slow, controlled breathing improves heart rate variability, a marker of resilience. The phalanx breathed itself into calm without ever naming it. Then there was pain, not glorified, not avoided. Blisters, sore joints, cold hands, sunburn. Pain was information, not identity. This is perhaps the hardest lesson for modern minds. Pain wasn't something to eliminate before action. It was something to act alongside. Neuroscience now shows that perception of pain changes with meaning. When discomfort is tied to purpose, it becomes tolerable, even forgettable. The Macedonian soldier didn't ask if training hurt. He asked if it worked. Weapons doubled as training tools. The sarissa, the long pike, demanded shoulder endurance, grip strength, and coordination. Holding it level for minutes trained the same muscles modern athletes target with loaded carries and overhead holds. The shield trained unilateral strength, forcing one side of the body to adapt while the other stabilized. Asymmetry, now praised in functional training, was built into their daily life. Perhaps the most overlooked element was community. Training was never solitary, suffering was shared. This matters more than we like to admit. Studies consistently show that people push harder and endure longer when effort is collective. Oxytocin rises, fear drops, pain tolerance increases. The phalanx was a social engine of resilience. No one trained alone, and no one quit alone. Alexander the Great inherited this system and sharpened it. He didn't invent the phalanx, he trusted it. He trained with his men, marched with them, slept on the ground with them. Leadership wasn't motivational speeches. It was shared hardship. The result was psychological alignment. When the line advanced, it wasn't because of orders alone. It was because everyone believed in the man beside them. Here lies the first great lesson. Strength is environmental. The Macedonian phalanx didn't rely on motivation. It relied on structure. The environment demanded movement, cooperation, and endurance. Modern life does the opposite. It removes friction, then asks us to manufacture effort in artificial spaces. Gyms try to recreate what daily life once required. The second lesson is that simplicity scales. No complex programming, no constant novelty, the same drills, the same marches, the same loads, slightly harder over time. Progressive overload without spreadsheets. Today, exercise science confirms that consistency beats variety for long-term adaptation. The phalanx was consistent to the point of boredom, and that boredom was strength in disguise. The third lesson is about identity. Training wasn't something Macedonian soldiers did to look better. It was who they were. Identity-driven behavior sticks. When movement is part of who you are, not something you schedule, it survives stress, chaos, and fatigue. The phalanx didn't train to be warriors. They trained because they were warriors. As years passed, bodies changed. Not dramatically muscled, but dense, scarred, capable. Archaeological evidence suggests robust bone structure and joint wear consistent with lifelong load-bearing. These were not fragile physiques. They were built to last through impact and repetition. Longevity in their context meant surviving campaign after campaign. Durability was success. There is a quiet humanity beneath the armor. These men laughed, complained, missed home. Training wasn't joyless. There were songs on the march, jokes around fires, pride in shared hardship. Positive emotion matters. It buffers stress hormones, supports immune function, and reinforces memory. The phalanx wasn't a machine, it was a culture. As the sun set on their camps, muscles aching, shields stacked, spears grounded, the body learned something modern bodies often forget, that it is adaptable beyond comfort, that it grows not only when challenged briefly, but when challenged repeatedly, patiently, with meaning. The story doesn't end in ancient dust. It reaches forward into us. We live in a time of unprecedented convenience and unprecedented fragility. We move less, yet feel more tired. We train more intentionally, yet often feel weaker. The Macedonian phalanx offers a mirror, not a prescription. You don't need their wars. You don't need their weapons. But you can borrow their principles. Build strength into your day, not just your schedule. Walk more than you think you need. Carry awkward things. Stand tall under load. Repeat simple movements until they become instinct. Share effort with others. Let discomfort teach without letting it define. Most of all, reconnect strength to purpose. The phalanx wasn't chasing fitness. It was serving something larger than comfort. Modern science agrees with ancient practice on this one point with startling clarity. Bodies thrive when they are useful. Living better, not just longer, means accepting that ease is not the same as health, that resilience is earned slowly, that the quiet discipline of daily movement outlasts any burst of motivation. The Macedonian phalanx conquered empires not because they trained harder for an hour, but because they lived stronger every day. And in a world filled with gyms, apps, and endless advice, that might be the most radical lesson of all.